Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 207. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode and this channel where all we do is talk and discuss movies. It has been a long time since I have recorded an episode. My apologies on that. I actually went on a little international trip with my wife, Liz. We actually got a chance to go visit Costa Rica for our honeymoon, and my goodness, what a blast we had. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Again, this podcast, this channel is all about movies, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up. If you ever have the chance to go visit Costa Rica, I would highly recommend it. The food is incredible. The activities that you can do are so fun. There's so many things to explore in the country. I'm not getting paid for this. This isn't an ad at all. I just wanted to give you my honest thoughts about Costa Rica. So if you have the chance, please go visit. But funny enough, this international trip actually lines up really well with today's episode because when we actually left for our trip, we actually lined it up with a big time summer blockbuster movie. I don't know if you've heard the movie. It's called Spider-Man Brand New Day. And so because we left around that same time of when Spider-Man opened, I actually couldn't get a chance to watch it on opening night. And so I had to wait a full week before watching it. I had to stay away from my phone. I didn't want to get spoiled about anything. And so that's why this episode is coming out a little bit later. But even though the world has already seen Spider-Man, maybe you're still interested in listening to somebody's thoughts. And if you are, well, please continue listening because I'm going to give you my full non-spoiler and then spoiler thoughts about Spider-Man Brand New Day. Before we get there, though, if you could do me a huge favor, episode 206 of the Timeless Movie Podcast is out on all platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. I went solo on that podcast and talked all about Christopher Nolan's newest film, The Odyssey. My goodness, what an epic film that was. I went to go see it twice. That's how much I enjoyed it. I went to go see it in IMAX, then in 70mm IMAX, and both times were freaking fantastic. But what do you all think? Did you enjoy The Odyssey? Do you have some type of cons or things that you just didn't enjoy? Well, please listen to episode 206. Drop it down below in the comments. That way we can talk and engage about that film. Also, Timeless Movie Podcast has its own email. It's open. Please send me your questions, your thoughts, your reviews on recent movies. I would love to read those and maybe even bring those up on the podcast as well. You can reach out to us at timelessmoviepod@gmail.com. All right, let's go ahead now and jump into this week's episode in which we are talking about Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, I believe this is the first time that I am covering a live action Spider-Man film. I've covered the animated movie, like Across the Spider-Verse, but from a live action perspective, I actually wasn't doing the channel when No Way Home came out. And so I wanted to give everybody here, in case you're curious, maybe you're not, and if you're not, you can go ahead and skip a couple seconds as well, but maybe a couple minutes for how much I ramble. But I wanted to give you context about my connection to the Spider-Man character. I grew up with Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi and the Spider-Man trilogy. I enjoyed those films. Those will always have a special place in my heart. But I will be honest, and my brother Omar knows, if he's listening here, he already knows my qualm with the Sam Raimi and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And that is, I never could connect to Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. Something about the way he would deliver lines was just too cheesy. The way that his face would just stay so muted, so bland, show no emotion. I just never was able to connect with that character. And so, although I enjoy the Spider-Man films from Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire, he was never my Spider-Man. He was never who I pictured as my Spider-Man. Then we had Andrew Garfield. I thought he was the wittiest and the funniest Spider-Man, the man under the mask. I thought he delivered such great energy, and it was so cool to see him back in No Way Home. But the Amazing Spider-Man series, the story themselves, just never clicked with me, and with I think a lot of folks as well. Just narratively, it never actually worked. And then we get Tom Holland. And to me, out of the three live action actors, Tom Holland is the one I connected to the most. I personally feel that he nails both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He's not as funny and witty as Spider-Man when it comes to comparing them to like Andrew Garfield, let's say. but I think he's funny enough, and he's able to still throw a couple of quips out there and make these different types of scenes feel a little bit more humorous, whether he's fighting a villain or things of that nature. And then as Peter Parker, he is believable because he makes himself very vulnerable. He tries to be very sincere, and all the decisions he makes as Peter Parker are for the good of himself, but also for the people around him. And so, to me, I think Tom Holland nails it as Spider Man. I also think that it helps that I was such a big fan of the MCU. I was in love with the Avengers, Iron Man, Cap, Thor, and when Civil War came and they introduced Spider-Man, I was already at an all-time high of just being on the MCU bandwagon. I still am, but at that point, they could have introduced anybody and I was going to fall in love with that character. And so, as soon as they introduced Tom Holland, I was all in. And so every film that he's come out in after that, whether it was the Infinity War or Endgame films, whether it was his own trilogy, Tom Holland has delivered just better and better performances as he's gone on as the character of Peter Parker and Spider Man. And so now we have Spider Man Brand New Day. What does this film entail for Tom Holland? How does he do? What other aspects can we talk about? Well, we'll talk all about that in the spoiler section. First, let's get to the non-spoilers. That way I can give you a little bit of context as to who directed it, who comes out in the movie, and my overall thoughts. All right, Spider-Man Brand New Day is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. Have you heard of him? He actually made films like The Glass Castle, Just Mercy, and more importantly, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. One of my favorite movies after Endgame in the MCU. And I was super excited because I had heard that Destin was going to originally going to direct Avengers Kang Dynasty. There was going to be a Kang film revolving around Jonathan Majors as Kang. Eventually, all of that got scrapped, and then they kind of moved away from using Kang Dynasty at all. And what that left the MCU with was, okay, well, we have Destin Daniel Cretton. Why don't we give him Spider-Man? Because the former director, John Watts, he was done after the 3 films that he made. And so now Destin had a chance to take a crack at one of the biggest all-time heroes in the world in Spider-Man. And once I heard that news, I was pumped because, again, I loved Shang-Chi, the action, the way that they were able to introduce a character like Shang-Chi and make you want to be on his side, make you want to root for him in every way. I just couldn't wait to see how he was able to translate that kind of same emotion into the Spider-Man world as well. Now, speaking of this world and everything that revolves around Spider-Man, who are the actors that come out in this new world? Well, let me tell you. We have Tom Holland, Zendaya, Sadie Sink, John Bernthal, Mark Ruffalo, Jacob Batalon, Michael Mando, and Tramel Tillman. There's a couple of other folks as well, but just wanted to give you a couple of the core role players in this film. Now, little synopsis. What happens in Spider-Man Brand New Day? Well, let me tell you. We pick up right after No Way Home, in which the entire world forgets who Peter Parker is. So Peter Parker is alone. Nobody knows. He doesn't have Aunt May anymore. MJ and Ned don't recognize him. But you know who everybody does recognize? Spider-Man. And so Spider-Man is just completely taking over New York by helping reduce crime and doing all he can to just put people behind bars. And so as Spider-Man is getting all of this cheer and all of this love, Peter is having to just live a very lonely life. And so this is pretty much the core of Spider-Man and Spider-Man stories. And in typical fashion, you get to see Peter having to do battles in 2 different areas. The first battle is his personal life. How is he going to deal with having something that is non existent? He has nobody to rely on, he has no support system. And so he's essentially living this world where, well, all I have is Spider Man. And so maybe I should dedicate more time to being Spider Man. But that has its risks. And then as Spider Man, he ends up encountering a new threat that he can't see or touch. So, how the heck is he going to try to battle that as well? And both of these situations end up colliding, forcing Peter into a tough situation on whether he has to really decide, can I be Peter Parker and Spider-Man, or do I have to only choose one? So, that is the decision that Peter has to make. That's all I'm going to give away for the non-spoiler side. Again, I feel like because this episode is coming out a week late, pretty sure everybody has already seen the movie, so you already know the details. But what you don't know is my overall thoughts. What did I think after I left the theater? Well, let me tell you. I thought Spider-Man Brand New Day was a really good to a great movie at times. I think I can for sure say that this is probably the best action that I have seen in a live action Spider-Man movie. Hopefully that makes sense in how I articulated it. But I don't think I've seen action portrayed in a Spider-Man movie that felt so believable, that felt so practical. Uh, I feel like practical is going to be the key word for movies in 2026. We've had practical movie making in The Odyssey, in Project Hail Mary, and now in Spider-Man. We use a lot of the practicality and the way that they were able to set up a lot of these set pieces for action were just so incredible. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much of what the action was. I do want to talk about it in spoilers, but everything from Spider-Man swinging around New York, whether he's fighting different types of villains or henchmen, whenever he's just around different types of environments, it all feels believable to what a Spider-Man should be doing. Many times in the prior, trilogy of Spider-Man films in the MCU, it was a lot of heavy CGI, a lot of CGI used to show Spider-Man swinging, and anytime it was practical was really when he wasn't in motion, when he was just standing around talking to somebody. No, and in Brand New Day, you have either Tom Holland or his stunt doubles actually going off and jumping and flipping and doing hand to hand combat, jumping off of walls, swinging from one place to another. Everything is just so smooth. And that's the best thing I can really get from a Spider-Man movie is that I want to believe that he's actually going around swinging and saving the day. I don't want to just see a CGI character or something that is just heavily impacted by visual effects. I want to actually see Spider-Man doing something to save somebody and fighting off a couple of criminals and every punch, every kick, every web that he's able to sling, I want it to feel like it's real. And I think they were able to nail that. And again, credit to Destin and his choreographers as well. I'm pretty sure he got that same kind of methodology of like, here's what we got from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, some of the best action in all of the MCU. Let's bring some of that same energy into Spider-Man. And I think it worked wonders. Other things that I think worked for me in this film is the emotional beats. I thought there was a lot of great scenes. And this just goes to show that like the cast of characters, like who they got, they're all just really delivering. They all understand these roles. You've had Zendaya, you've had Jacob, and you've had Tom. All of them play these characters already for 4, sometimes 5 different movies. They know these characters like the back of their palm, and yet you're still able to see them just kind of, like an onion, get another layer of this character and just show more emotion, be more raw. And so there's a lot of different things that kind of happen in this film. But what I love most is that all of the emotion, all of that kind of the struggle that Peter has to go through, it all circulates around the central theme of this movie, which in my opinion is literally just about how we can't face the world alone. No matter how powerful, no matter how strong we are, there's no way we can do it just on our own. We can't just take on the world and take on all newcomers and not have a support system around us. If there's nobody supporting us, then we just kind of fall into a black hole and we get stuck. And that's kind of what I took from the movie. But again, everything just worked from an emotional standpoint, from the action, the humor, the music was awesome. Now, the movie isn't perfect. There are aspects that I wish were refined in the third act. We'll get to it in the spoiler section, but I wish there was a couple of things that could have been tweaked just to make it an even better film and really end on a good high note. But again, that's just my feelings of it. I did feel the runtime, which is really weird because No Way Home, I think, hit like 2 hours and 45 minutes. That one feels like it's just moving at such a great pace. This one and the third act, it eventually hits a point where you start feeling like, okay, is the ending coming? Okay, no, the ending's not here. No, wait, we still got a couple more minutes. And so it feels like it could have ended a little bit earlier, but again, that's just my opinion. I would have maybe cut a couple of things, but Again, we'll get to that in the actual spoiler section of this podcast. All right, those are my overall thoughts from a non spoiler perspective. Let me tell you my suggestion if you haven't checked it out. Again, I know that this is already a week later. Pretty sure the entire world has already seen Spider Man. But if there's somebody out there listening to this episode and you're looking for a recommendation, well, here's mine. I would highly recommend you guys check out Spider Man Brand New Day. If you're a Spider Man fan, and even if you haven't seen the other ones, obviously you're missing a lot of the context, but I still think this is an incredible time. There is something that you will take away from this film, whether it's the set pieces, whether it's the different types of emotion that you'll feel, whether it's the different types of seeds that they're planting in regards to what's coming in the MCU. There is just so much there in this film. So that's going to be my suggestion. Go check out Spider-Man Brand New Day in theaters. I believe it's even in IMAX in some places. I want to check it out again in Dolby Cinema because I checked it out in Costa Rica in a normal laser theater, but I want to really experience it with a different type of a screen to see if the colors pop up even more. All right, those are my overall non-spoiler thoughts. Let's now dive into some spoilers. I want to talk a lot more about the action. I want to talk about the different types of emotion that I got to experience while I was watching this movie, and also some things that maybe didn't work. And so, if you don't want to be spoiled about Spider Man Brand New Day, please jump out of the podcast now, watch the movie, then come back and in the comments, drop in your thoughts. Let me know. Do you agree or disagree with some of the thoughts that I am bringing up around this movie? That way we can have a really good discussion back and forth about this film. Okay, hopefully I gave you guys enough time because spoiler starts right now. Okay, let me start off with the biggest positive that I can say about Spider-Man Brand New Day is that this world feels like a Marvel comic. It truly feels lived in. Why does it feel that way? Well, it's because we finally have these moments that I think a lot of fans have been waiting for. We have Peter interacting with Frank Castle. The Punisher comes out in this movie. We have Peter interact with Yelena Belova. This is probably the biggest surprise for me. I was not expecting Florence Pugh to appear in this movie. And so I'm really glad that even though I watched the movie a week after, uh, that I wasn't spoiled at all about this cameo. And so I really love that Peter got to interact with a member of the new Avengers. You also have Bruce Banner appear in this movie. He interacts with Peter Parker. And the biggest one, and this is something that I think I kind of knew going in, the biggest interaction we have is Peter Parker with Jean Grey. That is right. We have our first introduction to the MCU X-Men, and it is Sadie Sink playing Jean Grey. Now, that rumor was going on for such a long time that I kind of felt like I already knew that she was Jean Grey, so it wasn't that big of a surprise. Again, I popped more for Yelena Belova. I popped more for seeing Florence Pugh in this movie. I was not expecting her at all, so that was really cool. But now, a lot of people might think, oh, well, you just like that there's cameos. No, no. What I love about this is that there's meaning behind these types of interactions. There's depth to why these characters are appearing. If you talk about, well, what's the purpose of Yelena Belova? Well, she actually does a good job when she's talking to Peter. Peter kind of goes to her and asks her about trying to get a little bit more information about the Department of Damage Control and finding out who this person that could be a telepath is. And in these conversations, you actually get to see that, hey, for Avengers, we don't deal with this kind of small, petty stuff. We deal with big potato stuff. And then Yelena Belova even tells very explicitly to Spider-Man, you deal with the smaller stuff. You're more of the neighborhood guy. You deal with all this kind of ground level stuff. Let the Avengers deal with more of this kind of high level space type of situations that could come up in Earth. And so that's, I think, a really good way to kind of just set the terms that yes, we have all of these characters in New York. We have all of these characters that should be interacting, but I mean, this is pretty obvious. The Avengers aren't going to be able to solve every single type of issue. They have to deal with their own big time problems. And so I really like that Yelena kind of set the terms, not only for Spider-Man, but for the audience, and that, hey, there's the ground level superheroes. You guys can manage this. And then when it deals with something very catastrophic, that's where the Avengers can come in. And so again, there's purpose in regards to why Spider-Man is talking to Yelena Belova to set the terms of where these heroes kind of fall and why maybe you see some and why you might not see some in certain movies. With Frank Castle, I really enjoyed this interaction between Peter Parker and Frank Castle because Frank Castle actually shows Peter, hey, if you want to be a loner, if you want to be that lone wolf, this is what it's like. I am what you can become if you don't have anything else. If you're just looking to be this guy, the Punisher, the entire time, your entire life just invested to this person, this is what you're going to become. And Peter sees that. He sees that like, well, I mean, Frank doesn't have a good life. He lives from place to place looking for safe houses, is just trying to track down and kill anybody he can that he feels needs to be provided justice. And again, I think it's a really good mirror for Peter to show that, hey, if I don't have a support system around me, if I don't allow other people in to know who Peter Parker is, then I'm going to become Frank Castle. I'm going to become this loner that will just have a lot of hate in his heart, have a lot of this trauma inside of him. And so I really love that that interaction again has purpose, it has meaning. It has this way to show Peter that you can't just go at it alone. This is the theme that I kept getting from the movie is that you can't just fight the world on your own. Even if you are the strongest superhero, even if you have all of the abilities, even if you're cunning, you can't do it alone. You're eventually going to need to open yourself up and get the help from other people that either have powers, don't have powers, but being able to rely on other people and get that support is what keeps these heroes going. So, really dug that. And then even Bruce Banner. I mean, those interactions with Bruce and seeing him back into the fold of the MCU, and really, these are some of the most interesting conversations because they're talking from a technological perspective about inhibitors. And essentially, what we get is Peter ends up coming up with the first type of mutant inhibitor. He actually comes in with a chip and develops a chip that is able to really reduce the levels of his own types of arachnid abilities, but also he can put it on Jean Grey to stop her mutant abilities. And so we've seen this, if you guys have ever seen like the X-Men 97 series or even the classic X-Men animated show in the 90s, usually inhibitors are created by different types of individuals that are villains against the mutants. I was not expecting Spider-Man to be the one to create an inhibitor. And so that just leaves it open to, well, somebody's going to want to use that technology. Somebody's going to find out how Peter made this and then start applying it to all of the upcoming mutants that are going to start appearing in the MCU. I found that fascinating, but again, came from the purpose of discussing with Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner made his own inhibitor to control the Hulk, but again, everything has purpose. So I know that there will be people that will complain and say, "Well, these are just cameos. They have no value." No, they actually do have great value. They all are meant to show Peter something, either to show him something that he should not become, or to show him like the differences between what a specific hero can do, or what heroes can actually provide him some guidance as well. So really just dug that the entire world that Destin and the writers of Spider-Man Brand New Day were able to build to make this feel like an actual comic. Any comic character could pop up. You don't even know. And so I just really loved how lived in this world was. Okay, other thing that I got to call out. I mentioned this a little bit in my non-spoiler thoughts, but I loved the fact that Spider-Man was just in New York, just in the neighborhood, swinging around, saving the day. We have already gotten Spider-Man going off to a different planet. We've seen him traveling to a different country. We haven't seen him just be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I think that's a common complaint that a lot of people have brought up. It's not something original that I'm saying, but my goodness, did it feel so cool to see him swinging, to see him just jumping and going from different buildings to buildings using his web. Oh man, it all felt like the movie that I think a lot of people have been waiting for Tom Holland and the MCU is not having to apply Spider-Man or move him to a different place. No, just keep him in New York. He is from New York. He is meant to save the city. And I just love that he got that type of that recognition. We'll talk about it a little bit later in this cool scene, but just seeing him swing around New York and just protecting the city and just doing the right things. It just felt like the Spider-Man that we've been looking for in the MCU. And I'm finally glad that it's here. Also, wanted to call out, my goodness, how cool was it that Spider-Man was able to interact with Ned and MJ again? Through the first part of the movie, because you're seeing Peter alone, the film feels very somber. It feels very lonely. You as the audience member can feel the pain that Peter's going through because he's having to live through the experiences of his friends through his phone. He's seeing the stories that Ned puts up about how him and MJ have graduated MIT, where Peter was supposed to go with them. And now he's having to kind of live through them and see how their lives are going and theirs are growing. And so for the first part of the film, the music that Michael Giacchino, shout out to the composer Michael Giacchino, developing a great score. Again, there's a lot more of these quiet moments, a lot more of the piano used in certain scenes to kind of show and represent how Peter is still struggling with. It's been 4 years, and I have no social life. I wish I could talk to MJ and Ned and get them back into my life, and he hasn't been able to kind of do that with them and tell them the truth. Well, not even the truth, but just let them know that he knew them. He was a part of their lives. But there is a moment in the almost like the second act where he's able to interact with both MJ and Ned. Again, they don't know it's Peter Parker, but he's able to go into their apartment, and it's almost like the old times, like the homecomings or the far from homes or no way homes, where you have this just natural chemistry between Ned, MJ, and Peter. Again, they don't know it's Peter Parker. They're just interacting with Spider-Man, but they start building Legos. MJ's drawing both Ned and Peter, and even MJ tells Peter, "Man, I haven't seen Ned be this energetic and be this happy in a long time. I can see why you guys were really great friends." And it's just all those scenes. It was just very quick, but in that moment, it just gave me so much nostalgia of, man, I miss when all three of them were together, when they actually knew Peter and they were able to just go on these crazy adventures, and all that stuff just brought back such great memories. And it makes me want to go back to watch the actual Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home trilogy, just because those moments will feel even sweeter when you see that, just they had such great times and great chemistry as well. So again, very quick scene that we got to interact with, or got to see Spider-Man interact with Ned and MJ, but it just was so well done. And again, these actors, Zendaya, Jacob, and Tom, they know these characters so well. So everything was just so well acted in that scene. All right, we got to talk about the action in this movie. I have been saying that this is probably the best action I have seen in a Spider-Man film, barring the animated movies. Again, because the animated movies, they have the freedom to do whatever they want. That you in the Into the Spider-Verse films and Across the Spider-Verse, there is no boundaries of what they can do. They can just pull off any type of action sequence. So, it's not fair to compare those, but from a live action perspective, to me, in my honest opinion, I think Spider-Man Brand New Day has some of the coolest action in any Spider-Man film. And again, it goes back to Destin and his team of choreographers for visualizing and creating some awesome sequences and using practicality, using stunt doubles, using actual people to pull off a lot of the different types of combat and not relying on visual effects. Now, are there CGI and visual effects included? Yes, of course. All of these MCU movies are going to have that, but it's being able to place it at the right time. And so let me run through some of my favorite action sequences. I have 3 of them. And please, down below in the comments, let me know your favorite action sequences. And if you agree, whether you think Spider-Man Brand New Day is the best action that you've seen in a live action Spider-Man movie. Okay, hands down, my favorite action sequence of Spider-Man Brand New Day is in the third act when Spider-Man goes face to face with the Hand Ninjas. Oh my goodness. We see this in the trailer, but I mean, it's incredible how you know that it's coming. You know that this battle is going to be set up, and it still supersedes the expectations that I had. I was ready to see like a lot of different types of movements, but man, you get to see bits and pieces of kind of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in a way. You see Spider-Man kind of wall crawling. Then you see some of the ninjas also wall crawling. You see them jump from wall to wall, fence to fence in a specific jail that they're in. And so, again, going back to the choreography, the practicality, the team uses their environment very well. They're in this specific cell, I think, in Rikers Island, and they're just using everything that they can around him. But even the hand to hand combat, everything that Spider Man does to jump around, do spins, be able to roll, use his webs, and just everything that he's able to perform, it felt believable. It felt like we were actually seeing Tom Holland or one of his stunt doubles perform every single action. And that also goes for the hand ninjas, just being able to pull off everything that they have with their katanas and all the weapons that they had. Everything was just so smooth. And then you also get to see Spider-Man pull off some awesome abilities. There's this one moment where Peter ends up accepting the arachnid abilities and these mutation that he's having, and he ends up accepting that and not having to inhibit it. And so what he does is that he now gets these enhanced abilities where he doesn't need his web shooters anymore. He has organic webbing, just like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had. And he has now a more increased web fluid within his actual wrists. And so what he does is that he actually busts out this awesome move where he jumps up to the top of the prison ceiling, and then he ends up spraying all of this webbing, and he gets all the hand ninjas trapped, and then he brings them all down and basically traps them in a room full of webs. I mean, I'm not doing it justice, but my goodness, the way that they showed Peter just spin throughout the entire room, throwing out all of this thwip and all the different types of webbing and just capturing all the hand ninjas. Incredible. And again, they used a lot of different types of slow motion in these action sequences. And I thought that was just a chef's kiss, a perfect addition of just slowing it down when it needs to slow down, just to make sure that the audience knows, hey, check this out. You're about to witness something real crazy. And oh man, that battle between Spider-Man and the hand, incredible. Second action sequence that I really enjoyed was Spider-Man versus the Hulk and the Punisher. Oh man, I had heard that there was a scene like this, but man, so the Hulk ends up being controlled telepathically by none other than Jean Grey. And Jean Grey is able to take off the inhibitor of Bruce Banner and is able to kind of eventually control him as the Savage Hulk. Then eventually, after the telepathic connection is broken, then Bruce Banner can't control, because he doesn't have the inhibitor anymore, he can't control his tendencies, and he eventually becomes the Hulk again. The Hulk that we have seen in the Avengers films as well, or the first Avenger film. And now Spider-Man and the Punisher have to face off against the Hulk. And there's just so many beautiful sequences where you have this slow motion shot of Spider-Man jumping over the Hulk, and then he flips a web down to the floor to pull Frank Castle so that he doesn't get crushed by the Hulk. And then you just see Frank just screaming, "Ah!" And he's just like shooting right at the Hulk, knowing that none of the bullets are going to hurt him. But that whole sequence of Spider-Man versus the Hulk and getting the assistance of Frank Castle at times was just freaking awesome. And it also shows the intelligence of Peter Parker. He tries to web the Hulk outside of the building of the Department of Damage Control, and he's like webbing him, but like using the actual cement around the building, and he's webbing him and webbing him, and he's trying to put the inhibitor chip on the back of the neck of the Hulk. And there's just so many different types of sequences that occur in this fight, but it was also scary because at any point in time you could feel that the Hulk in this kind of a stage, he's able to just crush Spider-Man at any point in time. And he even pulls out that Loki slam that he did in the first Avengers film in 2012. He does that to Peter Parker. But again, Peter, being an enhanced individual, obviously took a little bit of damage, but he was able to survive and eventually was able to calm down the Hulk and show him like, hey, Bruce, I'm your friend. And, eventually the Hulk snaps out of it. But that whole battle was able to show the intelligence of Peter Parker, how he's able to think on his feet. It shows how terrifying the Hulk still is. He even got an actual thunderclap or a Hulk clap to be able to knock out Peter when he's running away from him. There's just so many cool sequences. I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting a lot of the details of it and butchering a lot of it as well. But I just wanted to describe that cool sequence. And then we have Spider-Man versus Scorpion. And so Scorpion actually in his suit is able to battle Spider-Man. What was cool about this one is that this is when we start getting Peter noticing that there are differences in his arachnid levels of mutation. Something happened where, because of all the stress, because of him being a loner and committing himself and really overworking as Spider-Man, his arachnid levels in his body start rising and his eyes go black. And that's where his organic webbing starts kicking in. But he also becomes even more enhanced, he becomes more powerful. And that's where he actually has this battle with Scorpion, where at the beginning, he's not able to really, control the strength that he has or control his webbing. But then eventually it completely takes over his body. And then he has ultimate strength. It almost feels like he gets infected by like the symbiote. That's like the best example that I have, because he immediately starts punching and just completely knocking out the Scorpion, almost to a point where he could have killed him. And so it shows that the arachnid mutation inside of him almost took control. But that whole sequence of him trying to control it, trying to master it, and then eventually letting it take over was just so awesome, because there's moves that he pulls off that remind me so much of the Insomniac Spider-Man games. If you guys have played those on the PlayStation 4 or 5, there was so many sequences, not only against Scorpion, but also against these different types of henchmen, people that had weapons. Spider-Man would pull off these sick moves, and it all reminded me of actual moves that you could do in the video game. And so I'm really curious. I haven't heard any interviews, but I'm really interested to know if they actually got inspiration to pull off some of the choreography by watching the Insomniac games, because there's times where Spider-Man will like jump up in air, then flip his webs down to the floor, and then just pull himself so that he can just go at a massive speed and crush the Scorpion. That move was straight out of the Insomniac Spider-Man games, but I really love that. Just again, the action, I can't talk about it enough. It was all just so incredibly believable and real, and that just goes a long way to making you suspend your disbelief and just continue to build off of and see more action for Spider-Man and make you believe that he's actually doing all this stuff around New York. All right, enough about the action. I have a couple of other things that I want to call out, and then eventually do want to talk a little bit about some of the cons or the nitpicks that I had. But from an emotional standpoint, I really love this one scene between MJ and Peter. MJ ends up finding out that, well, Peter actually knows MJ and Ned, and they were all together at some point. They were all friends. And, well, MJ and Peter, even more than friends. But MJ finds out because she finds the letter that Peter has. If you guys remember, he had a letter that he had written to MJ, and he was going to give it to her at the end of No Way Home, and then decided not to. And he's waited 4 years, and he never gave it to her. But MJ finds it in this location, the safe house that she is at. She's being protected by Frank Castle. And when Peter comes back, MJ is just furious and basically kind of calls him out and says, "When were you going to tell me? And why were you having to be the one in power? Why did you have to be the one that makes that decision? Like, I should be the one that make the decision of believing you and seeing if I could remember that you were Peter." And that's where Peter ends up confessing his love and says that, I'm doing this for you. I want to protect you, and I'm nothing without you. You are my world." And after Peter pours his heart, Tom Holland with a great performance, tears in his eyes, you hope to see MJ agree and say, "Yeah, I remember," but she doesn't. MJ says, like, "I'm sorry. I'm not the person that you're writing this letter to. I'm somebody that just doesn't have any memories. I'm somebody that doesn't know you, and I don't feel that same love." And so it was just a brutal back and forth between the two. And you could just, again, the actual audience that's watching the movie, you feel for Peter. You want MJ to remember, but she does not. And what makes this scene more impactful is that a couple scenes earlier, Jean actually goes into the mind of MJ, and as Spider-Man is saving MJ, he doesn't realize that she is being controlled. And so what does Jean do? She pretends to remember Peter Parker. And Tom Holland as Peter Parker is amazed. He's like, "Yes, no, I'm so glad you remember. I'm so glad that you finally actually know the truth." And you can see that there's like a big weight off of his shoulders. and then you see the smile that MJ does. Oh man, it was such a great twist. I love when there's twists like that where you don't expect it coming, and you should have, because you know that, like, okay, well, this is something that a telepath would do. They could easily control somebody and make them say whatever they want. And I should have seen it coming, but that whole twist was awesome. But again, that first interaction between the, not the true MJ, but Jean and Peter sets up this great interaction later on in the safe house where MJ tells Peter, like, I don't love you. I don't know who you are. And so, again, just kind of setting up that they're either going to have to start from scratch or just be friends, and Peter's going to have to move on. But what a brutal and emotional scene. It just so well acted by both Zendaya and Tom Holland. Also, another emotional moment that I really appreciated was towards the end of the movie. There's a point where Peter actually gets fatally wounded. He gets shot by Frank Castle, not on purpose. Frank was actually trying to shoot Jean Grey because Jean was actually holding the entire city in this kind of a sort of like a telepathic prison. Everybody was frozen, and Frank Castle was outside of that range, that zone, and so he has a clear shot. He ends up taking a shot at Jean Grey, and because of his enhanced spider sense, he actually anticipates it, gets in front of it, and takes the bullet for Jean. And so what does Jean do? Jean actually uses her ability to not have Peter feel any of the pain so that he can get surgery and he can survive the fatal wound. But what ends up happening at the end is that Frank Castle ends up finding out who Spider-Man is, because in the hospital, they had to take off Spider-Man's mask. And what's so cool about this is that the entire city of New York knows that Spider-Man is fatally wounded. He's at the hospital. Everybody's waiting outside. And Peter's able to look outside and see that everybody in New York, or at least most of New York, is there to show their appreciation, there to show their love and support for Spider-Man and wanting for him to get well soon. And what Peter's able to do is that he's able to walk out of the actual hospital just as Peter Parker, because nobody knows yet. And what's funny is that Frank Castle actually, because he feels bad that he shot Peter, he actually puts on the Spider-Man mask and pretends to be Spider-Man and waves so that everybody knows that, oh, Spider-Man's okay. But I just love this actual scene because it's really the first time that Peter gets to kind of have an out-of-body experience. He gets to see what people actually feel about Spider-Man, what their actual emotions are, their admiration, their love, their respect for him, but he's not actually in the mask. It's Frank. And so he's able to look at Frank, pretend to be Spider-Man. He gets to be in the crowd while everybody is cheering and showing their love for Spider-Man. And so he actually gets to absorb all that. He gets to be a part of this social experience of everybody loving Spider-Man while him not actually being under the mask. He actually is able to cheer himself. And so I really love that because it kind of just shows that he actually can at least smell his flowers, right? He's able to actually obtain a moment where, man, the city of New York, they actually do care for me. And this is why I do it. This is why I am Spider-Man, is to show that these people can trust me with their lives, and I will do whatever I can to protect them. And so that scene was just awesome. I love that. And it's just a great moment for Peter that he, again, isn't alone. He has the city of New York behind him that care for him. And so, again, going back to the whole theme of you don't have to fight the world alone. So, really good stuff. Now, apart from all the emotional stuff, I do want to talk about a couple of things that did not work for me in this movie. And actually, what kind of kept it from being probably one of the best Spider-Man movies that has come out. These are going to be personal nitpicks, and please let me know. I don't know if this has already been discussed by folks on other podcasts and things of that nature. Again, these are just my raw emotions and thoughts. I actually felt that the movie did not do a good job with the death of Sarah Gray, who is the sister of Jean Grey. I feel like they kind of spoiled it, or they made it very obvious for the audience to figure out that she was dead, because there's a moment where Tromel Tillman's character of Bill Metzger, he ends up telling Jean as she is strapped into a specific box as they're going to start performing experiments on her. He tells her, yeah, we don't want your sister's sacrifice to go to waste. As soon as he said that, that let me know as an audience member, oh, okay, so she's dead. They killed her. And then later on, Jean Grey, a couple scenes later, barely realizes you killed my sister. And so I feel like there was like a disconnect there. Like I think they should have made it more clear that the Department of Damage Control killed Jean Grey's sister, and not like, I guess, just not spoil it. I feel like they kind of gave it away too easily to the audience. What I love about some movies is that you never want the audience to figure it out before it actually happens, and that's essentially what happened to me in this film. I figured out that, okay, well, Damage Control took away Sarah Gray, and they killed her, and then eventually you find that out before Jean Grey finds it out. You never want that in a movie. The best movies that are created end up building a story where you find it out as the main protagonist or as a character finds it out. That way it becomes a big revelation. Here, you never want the audience to figure it out before Jean Grey, because then you're like, well, I mean, yeah, I get she's going to get frustrated, but I already knew that. I already knew what was going to happen. So I kind of wish that was done a little bit better, in regards to explaining the fact that Jean Grey's sister of Sarah was actually killed by Damage Control. Um, I would even say maybe even showing it, because they didn't show anything. They just said that she's not there anymore. I would have loved maybe Bill Metzger's character of just going and lying, maybe, and even saying she's in another room, or no, she's still being tested on, and kind of giving Jean this false hope, and then having her find out that no, she actually is dead because she can't feel her. She can't get into her mind. That's, I think, something that would have worked a little bit better for me. But again, I'm just creating an entirely different third act of the movie. So again, don't listen to me at all in that kind of a respect. Again, I'm not a screenwriter, but I just felt like that piece of it could have been done better. Also, I wanted to call out, I just mentioned a really good emotional scene between Aunt May and Peter slash Jean Grey. You know, this emotional scene of explaining to both characters how they need to center themselves around supports. I unfortunately didn't feel as emotionally connected when Aunt May was talking to Jean about this. And the biggest reason I can think of, and how I'm going to articulate this, is I think the fact that I have so much of this kind of background history of Jean Grey, that I kind of knew that she was eventually going to turn into a good character. Like, the problem with this whole situation is that in this film, they set up Jean Grey as this character that is the antagonist, when in reality, we know that she's going to be a future X-Men. So she's not going to be an antagonist. She's not going to finish the film as somebody that is evil. And so as soon as I saw her go into the mind of Peter and see that conversation with Aunt May, I kind of knew, like, oh, okay, well, she's going to take this conversation and she's going to use this, and then eventually realize that, oh yeah, I'm making a big mistake. And so I feel like because I knew what was going to happen, and my mind connected the dots before I was actually seeing it on the big screen, I feel like I wasn't emotionally invested. I just knew, like, oh, okay, yeah, this conversation is just going to help Jean understand that, okay, I'm not supposed to kill. I'm not supposed to do all of this. I probably should just stop and understand that this isn't the way to remember my sister. This isn't going to bring her back. Again, that's kind of how my mind works. And again, it's unfortunate. It's my fault because of the history that I have. I know that Jean Grey is going to be a good character. She is one of the strongest X-Men and one of the strongest mutants. I know that she's not going to kill anybody. And so, again, I think because of that background knowledge, I kind of felt like I wasn't as invested in that emotional scene because, well, I know that this conversation is going to help her turn her mind around or have a change of heart. And so that's what I felt. I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but if you did, please let me know down below in the comments, or let me know if you completely disagree with my take on that specific scene. Also, regarding the Aunt May scene, I actually kind of felt like that should have been hidden completely. They actually showed that scene right at the beginning of the movie when Peter has this moment of arachnoid levels start spiking, and he sees in his mind a scene with him and Aunt May on a bed. And, you know, they don't see what they talk about. You just see them sitting together. I kind of wish they didn't show Aunt May at all until the third act. That way it packs more of a punch. You have Marissa Tomei return. It is a surprise, but it's also impactful. It's meaningful. And the conversation that they have is something that will help both Peter and Jean understand what they have to do at that moment in their lives. Because they kind of highlighted it a couple of times throughout the movie, and you see glimpses and you hear pieces of the dialogue, I feel like it loses a little bit of its magic at the end. But again, that's just my thoughts. That's what I felt in regards to those kind of sequences. So I understand the emotional impact. I understand what it was meant to do. I just kind of wish they could have done it a little bit differently. That way it just would have really hit me in the gut when that scene came out as well. All right, everybody. That is all I got for Spider Man Brand New Day. I have been talking for almost an hour about this movie. Again, I had a great time, but before we wrap up, we got to answer one more question. Is Spider Man Brand New Day a timeless movie? Even though I have a couple of slight nitpicks about the third act and how they kind of went through that specific piece with Jean Grey and the emotional aspect of Aunt May talking to Peter and Jean, I gotta say that the movie itself is still a freaking awesome time. And I am gonna say that this movie is timeless. I would want to rewatch it, and I do plan to rewatch it again in theaters. Again, just because every time they come out with a new Spider-Man movie, they're just upping the ante a little bit more. They're either building his character more, they're showing more of the emotion, and they're just adding so many cool elements. And especially from the action perspective, I think that was probably the biggest piece and what would get me back into watching it is these incredible set pieces with Spider-Man and the Hulk, Spider-Man and the Hand, Spider-Man and Scorpion, Spider-Man and Henchman, Spider-Man against Damage Control. Whoever it is, the action itself is so beautiful to look at. So to me, in my opinion, this movie has so many great components. Again, I wish they could have maybe refined and tweaked a little bit of the third act, but maybe the second time or the third time I watch it, I won't have a problem with those as well. But for me, Spider Man Brand New Day is a timeless movie. What about all of you out there listening to this episode? Have you gotten a chance to check out Spider Man Brand New Day? If you have, let me know what your verdict is about this movie. Is it a timeless movie? Is it the best of the Tom Holland films of Spider Man? Let me know your ranking down below. I would love to hear your guys' takes on these Spider Man films, or really all Spider Man films that have come out in the movies as well. All right, everybody. Appreciate all of you sticking around and listening to my full thoughts about Spider Man Brand New Day. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 207 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out our next episode as we cover a new film. We'll discuss it, we'll give you our high level thoughts, we'll spoil some stuff, and then we'll decide if it is timeless. All right, everybody. Appreciate y'all listening, and I'll talk to y'all later.